My name is Matt Flanagan. I am a product manager with Appian, and this is Omesh, who is our information security officer. And today we're going to talk about how Appian Cloud plays in your enterprise in terms of security and the various controls and features we have put in place to help you comply with your enterprise guidelines. So this is a chart of all of the published vulnerabilities every year for the last 10 years or so. And as you can see, a couple years ago, there was a giant spike up, right? That's a lot of things to pay attention to if you are in a position of responsibility where you need to do that, right? The list gets updated every day. You got to go check it. Am I running anything that is on this list? Do I need to patch it? How fast do I need to patch it? All that sort of stuff, right? And this is getting a lot of attention because, it's a direct result, or it can directly result in pretty big breaches, pretty serious things. Nobody wants to be in this position, right? So we're going to talk to you about how Appian can help avoid that situation in the first place. And the way we're going to do it is this. I'm going to talk about kind of product features that are related to security. Then Omesh is going to go through a bit of our trust and compliance frameworks that we have in place in Appian Cloud, and as well as talk about the certifications that we recently added to our list. Okay, first off, single sign-on. This is probably one of the most important things you can do in your enterprise security-wise. It's very good to have a single place where all your systems go through when you're provisioning accounts or deactivating accounts. You don't want a user who leaves your organization to have their accounts deactivated in 5 systems, but not the other 3 because nobody forgot about them. It's not the position you want to be in, right? You want a single authoritative place in your enterprise where all, like a clearinghouse basically for authentication. And Appian can comply with this. We've got 2 options for single sign-on. You can either set it up LDAP authentication, where we will query out to your LDAP directory, or you can do a SAML integration, where we will go to your IDP and you authenticate there, and then bounce back to Appian and we'll let you in or not. Related to authentication, this is a new feature that's going to launch in 19.2. We're exposing web API keys, or API keys for web API authentication. This is a little bit safer than a password. It's very scoped access. You can't use this key to then log in like a normal user. It can basically only call certain whitelisted web APIs. So if you have a system that you want to call Appian, but it doesn't really, doesn't need access to all of Appian, it just needs like a little tiny piece of it, you can set that up, which helps in the case that the other system is breached in some way, because the credentials, they can only be used for little tiny things. Second, cross-environment access. This is another relatively new feature where we can have different Appian instances talk to each other and pass limited data between them. And this is good because it lets you not give privileged accounts in production to people who otherwise would need them, right? So, for instance, managing memory of process models is a thing that you have to do. You have to kind of watch it in case something goes out of control. In order to do that, you need to be a privileged user in prod because we don't want just anybody going on and seeing that stuff. But that's kind of not a best practice, right? You don't want privileged users in production if you can possibly avoid it, right? So the way this is set up now is you can be a privileged user in a connected environment instead of the primary production environment and get back metrics about how your applications are performing in production. So you don't actually need a production account at all for that user, and certainly not a privileged one. So again, like locking down the permissions to just what you actually need rather than a big blanket exposure. Outbound credentials. You heard Matt talk in the keynote about how integration is one of the key things in most Appian apps. Everyone wants to integrate all the systems together. And in order to do that, you need to have credentials stored somewhere so you can call out to the other system in a secure way. We have a baked-in feature in Appian where we will store credentials, basically industry standard best practice. This is how you store things that are sensitive like this. It's encrypted, it's controlled, it's logged and audited when you use it. Basically all the right things that need to happen in this sort of situation. And we kind of do all that work for you. You don't have to go build anything like that yourself. You just use the credential store that we provide. Proxies. So a lot of organizations want a a kind of clearinghouse for outbound connections so that it can be universally monitored and tracked and alerted and all that sort of stuff across all the applications in their enterprise. So they basically block outbound connections from Appian to the world. But Appian needs to talk to other things, and other applications also do too, right? So the way you address that, you set up a proxy that bounces. Appian makes requests to the proxy then makes the request to the original destination. But you can add security controls in place in the proxy, and Appian will basically act transparently with that. You won't know that it's going through a proxy from the developer's perspective. You don't have to think about it at all, really. You just check some boxes and it's done. Certificates also, for making outbound requests, it's a common way to authenticate to another system using a client-based certificate, which basically identifies Appian to the other system. And again, we can store those things securely for you and attach them to requests basically automatically. You don't have to think about it either. Once the cert's in the system, we know when we should apply it when we make a request. Tempo access control. So we have a lot of environments in Appian. Tempo is one, sites is one, embedded is one. What we found is that a lot of users or a lot of customers are building applications where Tempo is not expected usage. They have their users all going through sites or all through embedded or something like that. And there's a security principle called least privileges, where if you don't need something, you shouldn't have access to it. Not because the thing is inherently unsafe. I mean, we stand behind the code that we're shipping. Tempo is perfectly safe to use. But if you don't need it, just turn it off, right? This is a common request that we saw. Basically, it just tightens down your attack parameter, make things a little bit easier to secure. But again, don't feel obligated to turn it off. It is actually safe. Last thing I want to mention is Appian has recently set up a bug bounty program through a company called HackerOne, where we basically invite outside hackers to come and attack our systems. In a controlled way. It's not your system, it's test systems. But they are configured and deployed the same way that yours are. And they are probing for weaknesses and problems. And we are continuously addressing such feedback and making things better for you.
Yep, thanks Matt. So I just want to go back to the bug bounty one for our team in security. We do global security monitoring, certainly of our company, but as well as the cloud infrastructure and Appian Cloud. We were particularly excited about this as well. We do, last year we talked about a lot of the internal testing, all these things called gray box and black box, and all types of testing from inside and outside of Appian Cloud. Matt and the security team as well on the product side obviously do the software side of it. But this gave us an opportunity to have tests coming in all the time from security people. And my team, we build what we think are great security detections that are cutting edge, and then somehow they find something to defeat that. And it's kind of a cat and mouse game. So from the security side, it really allows us to stay on top of what are the current, especially in a web-based environment, what are the current attack vectors we can use. We can talk to the product security team as well as kind of the infrastructure security team. So that's actually been really entertaining. It's sometimes frustrating with them, as that there's more of them than there are of us. There always are. But I did want to talk about some Appian Cloud security enhancements that Appian's been working on here recently. So these are things that you can use right now that are fairly easy to use, but enable you to get the next level of security posture for a lot of our customers, especially in regulated industries. We'll be seeing some of these requests come in from customers. So first one I want to talk about is bring your own key encryption. So this allows customers to bring your own encryption keys for your Appian Cloud instances. So if you're using AWS's Cloud HSM, which is a hardware security module that manages encryption keys, you can provide us your encryption key and we will essentially wrap the server with that encryption key. This allows you, the customer, to control the decryption of that data. Of course, with anything with encryption, that system that you manage needs to be available. If we want to be able to service it for a reboot, for example, it has to be up, or else we can't recover the data because you are managing the key. This gets a little bit, I'm not going to go too technical in here, but it allows you to have your data encryption key on your customer side, and then also wrap it. And then wrapping in terms of security is a best practice to wrap the encryption key with another master key. called the key encrypting key. So you're providing us an already secure value, so we don't have access to the key there. The way this is done is Appian communicates with your key management infrastructure on your customer Cloud HSM over a secured connection, and through that we make the API call to get that key and that would happen the same way if you had to restart your site, for example. The next one I want to talk about is log streaming. Look, I couldn't be a security person and not talk about logs. It's not the most exciting topic, but it's pretty important in terms of from your security teams. If you talk to them, they've probably done in a vendor procurement process. What kind of logging facilities do they have? What can we get from us? Give us everything. That's probably usually how that conversation goes. At least that's what I tell our vendors. So with log streaming, Appian Cloud customers can stream logs in real time over a secure connection to their on-premise environment. And this is important because customers already probably have an analytics system they've already built. They already probably have a security incident management system, event monitoring system, or a SIM. And if you're in a regulated type of data, for example, you are subject to NARA guidelines or some kind of GXP requirement or federal requirements or other financial requirements, you may have a very specific regulation that says you need to keep security-related data for X amount of time, and this would allow you to get, for example, an authorizations file, login audits, and there's several other log streaming logs that come through here, and actually manage that with your own archival requirements for your industry. Similar to the previous diagram, again, this is all going in real time over a secure tunnel to your essentially a syslog receiver, which is just a big collector for logs, and most enterprises have one that, or many, maybe 20, that you may do that for redundancy. So this allows your teams to run your own security analytics or any kind of performance metric that you want on your log data coming right out of your Appian Cloud servers. Malcolm kind of stole my thunder on this one this morning, but we're happy to talk about AWS Private Link. Private Link, for those organizations that are using AWS infrastructure, many of our customers are, allows you to create a secure connection that routes only through Amazon's private network. So we have talked to some customers that don't want any what's called public routing. They don't want to go out to the internet to public IP routes and route around the world to get their data. So they may be in Amazon right now, and this actually would use a private connection on the back end and not go through public routing. So I have seen this in some very heavily regulated space, certainly when I deal with European banks, things like that. So we do support AWS Private Link, and this certainly is also going to reduce your network complexity. Certainly, we talked about BGP this morning. You'll see us trying to move it to make it easier. Rather than multiple VPN tunnels, we can have failover now with BGP coming. Certainly with Private Link, if you're in AWS, that'll be able to route privately through AWS infrastructure. So go tell your security teams. They're going to love it, hopefully. Malcolm also mentioned this morning, all these certifications we've been working on over the years, and also some new ones. We call this program, we just call it Trust. So we call it a trust program. So it's important. We realize that we operate the underlying infrastructure that it's a fairly complex and monitored and managed infrastructure. But we also realize that you don't have much insight into that, right? So we've spent the last year working on what we call the Appian Cloud Trust Center. So this new Trust Center, it's live right now. You can go to it at trust.appian.com, and it's a portal that has all the information you need about security and availability compliance to do with Appian Cloud. That's Miles Weber, our CIO there. If you guys have met him, he's here somewhere. So I just kind of want to walk through a few of the core areas of it. Certainly on the security portal, this is a living site. I think that's one of the important things. As we add some of these new features, the security team for either product side or infrastructure side add security features, we're going to be updating this so you can see live security improvements to our product. So right now, if you go to Trust, we have information about, you'll see security controls or defense in-depth controls, encryption, data isolation. This is also a portal for you to get any kind of collateral that we're going to continuously produce. So security white papers, these are going to be maybe some industry-specific ones. We'll talk, healthcare or federal, for example, and you can go self-service as a customer right there from Trust. The next area is availability. We heard there's 4 new regions, which is US Gov Cloud, Sweden, South Korea, and India that we have available for regions. But every time we introduce a new region, this will be living and updated with that site. We have a lot of global customers, certainly, and they have regulated information that they can't leave a certain region. So as they continue to expand their Appian low-code applications and they need an instance to stay in a specific region because maybe that's where the working base is, you can go right to our trust center and see where's the most appropriate region based on that regulatory requirement. And certainly for the federal community, with GovCloud, we have West, and now with the East support as well, which is, if you're in DC, it's closer to DC. For latency, that's good. All those flags that you saw there, those countries, this is actually a live uptime of our regions. So obviously you can tell the date that I made my slides on. It was April 16th there, but this actually goes back historically, and certainly anything that we have that may be a region-specific issue, that we communicate that. Certainly we'll reach out to you proactively as customers through our customer portal, through our solution engineering team, but also you can go here and see any live updates that we have if something were to have a blip in a region around the world in our cloud regions. Compliance. If you've seen me present, or over the years, we've had a heavy investment in security and compliance programs that we talk about every year, and it's growing. But certainly for the most common ones are going to be the SOC 1, 2, and 3 reports. I almost see those in almost every contract. If you're in life sciences, GXP alignment is certainly important to us as well for a life sciences customer. HIPAA, if you're in the healthcare space, or frankly, you're just dealing with any kind of healthcare in the United States, data, FedRAMP for federal customers. Privacy Shield for any kind of international transfer of data. But today I'd like to also announce that we have a few new certifications that we're quite proud of and very happy to announce. The demand has been high for these. The first one I want to talk about is ISO 27001. So Appian Cloud is now ISO 27001 certified with the 2013 version of this standard. So for those of you that have never heard of this or have maybe heard of it but don't know too much about it, ISO is essentially the definitive international standard for secure management of an enterprise security program. And it's not just you have these controls in place, like you have encryption and you have good change control practices. It's also how you govern and improve your security program. That's probably even a more important part of ISO, is that every year they're looking, when the auditors come in, they're looking and actually asking you, sure, it's good to know your controls are still operating effectively, but what security improvements did you make in the last year? And that's something that we're audited on as now that we're part of ISO. So we have to track obviously a bunch of metrics, but we also have to demonstrate that we are continuously improving our governance and maturity of our enterprise security program. We work with engineering, we work with cloud, we work with solution engineering, IT, HR, legal. Every department of the company is involved in this at the highest levels of management. And I know they are because they have to attend my meetings as the manager of this. This is an independent audit. We do hire an external body. You have to be a certified auditor in accordance with ANAB in the United States. There's a European body and there's an Asia Pac body as well. So this was a great thing to announce, and certainly our international community. This is, because this is an international standard. This applies to everyone, every single Appian Cloud customer right now. You get it for free to use, free power to use the slide notes from this morning. The next one is something called HITRUST. HITRUST is an organization that deals with health exchange, health information. This is the definitive framework for certification of processing healthcare-related data. So healthcare payers, providers, even maybe some of the HHS organizations that maybe FDA, they're dealing with this, or if you're life sciences, you could be dealing with clinical trials where you'd be dealing with healthcare-related data or any other things like that. So it's a security framework for organizations dealing with that type of data. You don't have to be just a healthcare, like a hospital, to be required to comply with HITRUST by law or the HIPAA security laws. You could be simply an organization that deals with that type of data. Think about at your companies, you have insurance companies that deal with medical claims, right? That's going to be applicable to what's called the HIPAA security rule, and HITRUST is one way to get comfortable that the organizations you're dealing with are aligned with the HIPAA laws. Those are laws, right? Those you shouldn't bend them. So certainly for HITRUST, it's something called the Common Security Certified Infrastructure, which means our Appian Cloud infrastructure. If you're going to be a HITRUST customer with us, we are able to host you in there as long as we have a business associate agreement that's required to sign there. Again, this is an independent certification by an independent auditor that certified a HITRUST report. It's several hundred pages long, and it was grueling. We're still here though, but we went through it and we're quite happy to announce this one. The third one I have to announce is Appian Cloud is now also certified with the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. So the NIST Cybersecurity Framework measures the depth and rigor of your actual security controls. So it's 23 categories across what NIST defines as the core categories of managing an enterprise security program. Again, this is also another independent certified auditor by the actual HITRUST organization. They, as part of, we were able to do both HITRUST and the NIST cybersecurity framework. So we're aligned to this. You know, NIST certainly, while it's a US agency that's doing that framework, they are mapped to international standards. So ISO and NIST are mapped very well together. Certainly, you're even seeing things like SOC 2 trying to make sure there's alignment and get some synergies between those frameworks. So we tried to get, I don't know if you want to take over the summary here, Matt?
Sure, why not? Yeah. Okay, so in general, the point we're trying to convey overall is that we, Appian, spend a lot of time thinking about security of our products, of our infrastructure, how our offering can play nicely in your enterprises and how it reflects your security practices and how we have to adapt to meet your expectations of us, right? Everyone's got a little bit of a different policy on which controls need to be in place for which systems and all that sort of thing. And we are flexible enough and put enough effort into making it kind of just work. So that basically shouldn't ever be a reason why an InfoSec team comes in and says, no, you can't install Appian. We put a lot of thought into how this stuff all works, and it pretty much does. So,
yeah, we have on the next slide, I think, some links and resources you can go to. We tried to right the time ship to get us back on schedule here. We know we went pretty quick, but Matt and I are both going to hang around here up off to the side here. If you want to have conversations about security, we'd love to. And thank you for attending Appian World.